We all want our videos to stand out. But how do you break through the noise when your audience is multitasking across different browser tabs while watching your video? Also, how do you build trust with your audience, which is, let's be honest, a vital result since healthcare is completely built on establishing trust between your organization and the viewer watching your video? Well, it turns out that the answer to both questions, according to my next guest, is to lean into the visual storytelling that is only possible through video. Instead of just pressing record and spouting the marketing messages that we've created just for our websites, it's time, according to my next guest, to really simplify things and get serious about telling stories on video. Joining me today on the program is Dustin Schultz. He's the executive producer at Union Productions, a full-service video agency. Together, we dig into why matching your production style to your specific channel is critical, how to use something called story loops to keep people engaged, and how their team won 3 Emmy Awards along the way. Let's get to it.
Swaay.Health.
Dustin, welcome to the program.
Yeah, Colin, thanks for having me. This is exciting.
Yeah, I'm very excited to have you on the program. Excited to dive into a favorite topic of mine, video. But Dustin, for the benefit of our audience, can you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about Union?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm Dustin Schultz. I have the title of executive producer at a video agency in Connecticut called Union. I've been around for 15 years. In that time, we've won 3 Emmy Awards, multiple other kind of notes of notoriety, and I can give like the praise to the rest of my team about that, about those getting those things, not me, but I can say they do such an awesome job, and a lot of what I do and what maybe our team does a little different is work with companies on the strategy and the why and how do you even approach video, not just the technical tools and those kind of things that we have as well.
Right. So full service, not just the editing and the filming. You do it all including strategy.
Yeah, yeah. There's a video is a big world to navigate, because it's like looping in people's waiting rooms, and it's on your phone, and it's lo-fi, and it's high production, and it's Marvel movies, and it's TikToks. And so like, how do you even like navigate this universe to help a company, increase market share or win new clients? Like that's what I like to do.
Well, Dustin, I will ask you about those Emmys later on in the episode.
Sure.
But let's start with this question for you. Like, in your mind, from a marketing standpoint, where does video make sense and where does it not make any sense at all?
Sure. Yeah, yeah. You're already trying to push us out of different categories. No, kidding. Yeah, I think there's, I would say, especially in the last 18 months, if we're kind of to benchmark off of March 2026, in-person events is making like such a huge comeback. As I think we still recover from mentally from COVID and virtual work and all of these things. And so I think there's a place where when ways that we used to maybe connect with video or, virtually via video are being replaced by almost like healthier methods of face communication, grabbing a coffee, things like that. And so I would say there's a space where don't replace your event with a video that communicates what you're hoping to do or sales processes. But even in some of those settings there's video content that plays on screens that enhances your event. And so video exists nearly everywhere. It's more of a matter of in what form does it take to make the most sense. And so, navigating that journey it's an important question to ask for sure.
You've done some work. You mentioned a few off air to me. You've done some work in healthcare. You've worked with the
Yeah.
side. You've worked with medical device folks. Where have you seen with those clients they've been effective in deploying video?
Sure. Yeah. I think, especially on the payer side, there is a lot of awareness focused content. And so the ability to establish a household name based on trust is really critical. It's critical across providers. It's critical for every every category within this kind of grand health landscape. Is trust is the ultimate commodity. And so awareness that builds trust, that also comes down to customer testimonials, and stories. I remember we had done some work for a major health insurance company, and definitely one of the biggest, I guess, to keep a name out of it. And they, through their customer service team, customer support team, had heard some pretty fantastic stories about the ways that their team was supporting some of their members, especially navigating one particular cancer story. And so we partnered with them to help tell the story of this individual, and how his life was really changed, not just by the fact of the payer taking care of the costs, but also supporting him, talking about how they taught him mindfulness and all of these different other aspects. And so you get to use video to paint a broader picture of yourself and tell very humanizing stories, that might be harder to do in a still image or a digital ad, or something like that. There's a bit more that you can dive into to show who you are in humanity.
That's great, actually, and it's encouraging to hear you say that video is very useful for awareness building, because
Yeah.
we consume video a lot now, right? As you said, while waiting in line, in waiting rooms, whether that's a YouTube video, a TikTok, or something even bigger than that.
Yeah.
So it's nice to hear that awareness is still a nice thing to use video for.
Oh yeah. I mean, the even in, and I know a lot of the folks engaged with Sway are B2B focused. To me, what awareness means really within B2B is that when it comes time for a decision to be made around an executive's table, if three of the five people there know your name, not just the elevator pitch that they're just hearing, or the RFP that's been fulfilled, that's a major leg up. If you become kind of like a household name, let's call it, within your industry, that is what awareness in B2B looks like.
It warms my heart to hear you say that, Dustin. Well, let me ask you this one though. So let's dive into a little bit about video. In your opinion, Dustin, what makes for a good video? What does good video content look like and feel like?
Sure. Yeah, I think there's a couple different ways to approach it. I would say first, from the side of, like, let's call it the client side, the person who wants to use video to accomplish something. That that their goal set is sometimes different based on their role. They could have they might not think it's effective, but their CEO is really bullish on the idea of it. So to them, success looks like getting the video done that their CEO wants to protect their job. So it really comes down to the individual. But then in terms of effective for the brand, in terms of driving, in terms of creating revenue, in terms of increasing awareness, some of these things, I think about how video needs to earn attention pretty immediately. We talk a lot about hooks. If you're on LinkedIn, everyone's talking about, the first two sentences in a hook is the same thing. With video, you need to earn attention, and then in another 20, 30 seconds, you need to earn attention again, and then again and again. And so something that creates the pause that people engage and has them continue to loop and remain engaged, that to me would be one of the aspects of good video. We often talk about video needing to communicate one idea really clearly. Again, this is like a classic B2B thing. Is they're like, hey, we're gonna make a brand film, we're gonna make it, and when we go to do it, we need to say this, we need to say this, we need to see these dozen other things. And what ends up happening is the viewer becomes so overloaded by the points. You get to the end and you say, what do you remember about that company? And they're like, oh, this one thing or these two things. So if you can kind of hone in the goal of that one clear idea that you want somebody to remember about you, and accomplish that well, then I think that's another aspect of a good video. Especially like how many commercials probably have you seen where you can recall the story, but you don't actually remember the brand, right? Maybe a property and casualty insurance company, and you're like, this happened, this happened, this happened. It was so funny. It was Geico or Progressive or somebody, and like that's great, but it didn't really go out and accomplish what the brand intended it for it to do. So if you can bring that clear idea back to your company and make it point back to you, that's another tenet of what good video content looks like.
Just picking up on some of the things that you said there, Dustin. I mean, you mentioned a few what I would call video best practices, right? You're talking about,
Yeah,
you got to hook someone in that first 20 seconds. You've got to re-engage their attention every few seconds as well. You can't be just sort of engage at the beginning and then get into the boring stuff.
right.
You mentioned like focusing on maybe one or two key messages rather than 15 or 12.
Yeah.
You talk about making sure that you tie it back to your company and not just make it a memorable story and then people forget who it was from.
Yeah.
Are there any other sort of video best practices that you would like our audience to know?
Sure. Yeah, I think making the right type of video for your channel is a critical best practice. Like a lot of times I'll hear things like, oh, we'll make this 90-second video and then we'll make some 30-second social media versions. And you're like, well, that's not how social media really works. So if you want social media videos, you can try and do some of the same economies of scale of saying, hey, let's do this production that's going to be going to, OTT, CTV placements. But that's going to be a different premium look than somebody who's wanting to going to be engaging with like a TikTok. And so you can't just kind of paint with the same brush across. It's making sure that you have both the production style and the creative story that aligns with its placement. I talk about that a ton early on with folks, is asking if they have an idea of what channels this content could be running down, what would those be? Because I try and think of all of the context of like, right now somebody's watching this, but it might be on a separate tab while they're responding to emails or doing something like that. So they're hearing every other sentence I'm saying. They're, they're like maybe rewinding if something catches their attention. Like if I said, hey, I'm over here on the other tab, that's kind of an interesting kind of breakthrough thing that could help stand out, draw someone back in. So if you're picking creative that exists and performs really well on its individual channel, that's maybe the most critical aspect of creating good video content.
Yeah, you mentioned a couple of things there that I want to just pick up on. One, you're right in the sense of production quality is, you don't always have to have the best quality. And in fact, it can hurt you depending on what channel you're on. Like TikToks are not overly polished, right? They're not supposed to be, right? YouTube Shorts, same thing. Instagram Reels, same thing. When you get into YouTube videos, the production quality does have to be a little higher, right? It usually is not shot just on a phone, right? It's usually with cameras and things. And then you go all the way to OTT and streaming, and that needs to be like documentary style, quality of video. Maybe not TV production, but that level. And so when you try to do one, it ends up looking weird in the other formats if you try to slice
100%.
it away, right? So
yeah.
I appreciate that. And I love your comment about being on the other tab. I mean, that's part of the reason why during this kind of episode, I usually repeat what someone says, because
Yeah.
at the point you may have heard it and then you're like, oh, and then you try to rewind it. But if I repeat it, then you're like, oh, good.
Yeah.
Summary version of what that person said. So these are tricks that you learn, because likewise, I listen to a lot of episodes while I'm doing other stuff on my second
Yeah.
screen. So that's just something, I guess what you're saying, what you and I are saying, is lean into that. Right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's every constraint pushes creativity further when you look at it from that perspective, as opposed to the negative. You know, if you could do really interesting things with typography because the person engaged with a LinkedIn video isn't putting the sound on because they don't want their coworker to know that they're watching videos on LinkedIn. Like, there's just so many flavors of how context makes a difference. And so you need to think about like what exists within the screen that's being watched and how to produce something that tells that right story. But also think about like, you know, what's going on in the environment around the individual. And like you mentioned, like streaming and stuff, if like, especially with the way we can target now with media buys, B2B in a streaming situation is suddenly really valid, a really valid option in the last couple of years, because you could target, you know, healthcare executives. You could, like, the way you can get granular, but they're not in a mode to be sold to. They're in a mode to be entertained because they're watching, you know, Amazon Prime. And so how do you kind of fit your brand within the box of the context in which they're existing?
I love it. I love it. Well, Dustin, let me ask you this.
Yeah.
You know, we have a lot of options in B2B, like in terms of stories we can tell. We have our own stories as a company. We have executive stories we can tell. We have obviously customer stories. Um, what are, how do I recognize a good story that will translate well into video?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, a couple things. And I think it pulls from a lot of classic story kind of tactics that have been around for thousands of years. But you want a story that has a measure of tension, and likely transformation. Um, you know, somebody, you know, maybe to pull from some of brands framework, like somebody exists, they have a problem, you know, they're looking for a solution. And part of why that tension creates dynamic is because even though you're on the company's website and you know the solution's probably going to be that product, there's still, I think, a couple percentage points of curiosity as to whether will they have the problem solved, or that problem is so similar to my problem, I want to see how it plays out. And so we call that opening story loops, because the idea is that when a question is presented, even if it's not said, but if someone develops a question in their mind, at human nature, we want the answer. We want to close the loop on that. So if you can begin to open story loops, that's a great method of just hooking somebody in. It's that, like, even though the who done it murder series, it's been done a billion times and you're trying to guess, you're like, I think it's the least suspect, like I think it's the maid, they're so unsuspecting, they're so kind, so you know there's going to be a twist, but you still watch 7 hours of it to get to the end. So in B2B, we're not asking people to watch 7 hours you know, to get to the answer, but the principle still exists if you can establish a question in their mind to get answered. Then hopefully you'll have that retention across a video.
Yeah, and I like what you said there, because you're right. In the B2B world, the outcome is usually, you know, the solution is the, you know, from the company that you're looking at the video from is the answer.
Yeah.
But I liken it to, well, that doesn't mean you can't tell a World War II story. We all know the outcome. We all know what.
Right.
You can still tell a good story of what happened in between, like, you know, something
Yeah.
there, and you can still build some tension, even though you know what the ultimate answer was or is. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I like that. I like that. Well, so how do I go about, Dustin, like creating a video? What plan or checklist do you recommend that it should go through?
Yeah. I mean, so I can kind of take you through what a lot of my initial conversations look like with folks. It's, first of all, it's really important for me to understand what they've been doing up to this point. You know, what have they tried? that worked, that didn't work, that they thought would work but didn't work. So just get a lay of the land. Because, for example, we had a medical device company come to us, and they had been having a lot of success with like creator content, and they were ready to make the move over to like, hey, we're gonna push on video harder. We're gonna try and do some streaming ads and things like that. And so they had a measure of key messages that seemed to be resonating. And so to begin to take some of those and then just expand on them, kind of like what you do in a lot of digital advertising. You're doing like, you're testing a lot of creative, what's resonating. Okay, now how do we double down on that? What aspect of it is working? And so we want to come in and glean as much information really quickly. We actually, in the process of approaching things that way, we developed what we call our video strategy workshop for folks who are coming in either with like just a goal or have never done video before, or like they want to see what our thinking is like. And so we do a usually 2 to 3 week sprint, 3 different meetings, and dive into what's been working, understand their tastes, get to know their differentiators, in establishing all of those types of things, and then begin to say, okay, how can that play out in a story, across a channel, in a video world and method. And then actually in that second meeting, we tend to bring, a dozen plus ideas of how you could begin to engage different pieces of content, going down different channels, and then get their gut check feedback, and then really develop that into a robust plan in terms of how long something could run, exact budgets, the specific channels, variables, hook options to A, B, C, D, E test. And so really kind of starting off with that initial understanding, because as a company, you should know, or you should know kind of like, who is your audience? What are the problem? What's the problem that you solve? It is a little amazing, especially in B2B, sometimes how unclear the problem you solve is. So sometimes this workshop turns it more into a therapy session of like, okay, let's hone it. Can you tell us the problem you're solving? Maybe this is the problem, is that you're still figuring it out, what your technology solves, or something like that. And then also like, what's the action you want somebody to take? We recognize in a B2B world that sales cycles can take 6 months, 18 months, 2 years. And so part of your video strategy within B2B is it being awareness and a very long nurture. So to me, that looks like someone's thinking, hey, customer stories, really powerful, customer proof. We want to do a customer testimonial. And so I'll say, okay, could we do a campaign of customer testimonials so that it drips into your buyer journey, that, if we have 4 instead of 1, every 3 months, they're getting a fresh one. And it's helping drive forward. Because especially with video in this world, creative always is really hard to tie back to like sales attribution. And so that's where I think a lot of executives will have a hard time like signing the check, because they're like, well, I can't drive the exact line always from this point to here, but it's because you had to have 15 touch points before anyone signs the contract. And if video can fill in a bunch of those and maybe add some velocity to the journey as well, these are a lot of the things that we're trying to like first uncover, but also help educate people on like what to expect from the results. And that's, one of the best places to start when it comes to thinking about video content and the strategy.
Yeah, I like that. You're basically going back to like every other marketing initiative that you have. You got to start with the basics first, like understanding your audience, understanding what your goals are before you start diving into, am I going on TikTok or Instagram or whatever? Like don't start there.
Yes.
You'll run into trouble.
Right. And you'll burn yourself out. Do 1 or 2 channels really, really well. and then you can kind of begin to expand and take some things on, take more channels on as you've got the first ones dialed. I think this idea of being everywhere is just not possible, just depending on your scale. So
Well, Dustin, you've shared a ton of information with us today. Final question for you. Where can
yeah,
you go to learn more about Union?
sure. So, thank you. Our website is theunionproductions.com. Theunionproductions.com. And so that has a bunch of different case studies of our work with everybody from Pfizer and Cigna and Canon Medical Group over to, Cedars-Sinai and other, we've done so much work in the health space, and really enjoy it. I think the fact and ability to like, I could never have been a doctor, and I'm definitely not smart enough to be inventing technology, but to help those people who are changing people's lives and using story to better share their stories, like, it's a pretty good reason to get up on Monday. And you could also follow me on LinkedIn, Dustin Schultz, DustinSchultz. It's probably somewhere. But I try and share, 3 to 5 times a week, different health, especially health focused video strategies, ways to consider the video world, how to navigate, like, what's the difference between an ad agency, production company, videographer, somebody on Fiverr, like, what's the right fit for when, and because none of them are wrong and none of them are right. And so, like, just different things that are just like the universe of my world. You can find me talking about on LinkedIn a lot. Those would be the 2 best.
Well, awesome, Dustin. That's fantastic. Thank you for that explanation. Now, as a bonus for those folks that are listening and watching right to the end here,
yeah, you've made it.
What did you win those Emmys for?
Sure. Yeah. So the first Emmy Award was for a documentary miniseries I had done when I was 21. I had gone to Haiti after the 2010 earthquake, and we did a documentary series about the rebuilding of a third world country and how it really doesn't kind of rebuild well. And so that was an unexpected recognition for that within kind of the Emmy, like, news category. We also won an Emmy Award for our NCAA basketball work with the Connecticut UConn Huskies. We did a campaign with their head coach, Gino Oriyama, who at the time had 10 national championships. And we built this idea around how he, in everyday life, wore all 10 national championship rings at all time, but never really acknowledged the weirdness of it to the different people he interacted with. So that got recognized with an Emmy Award for one of the best commercials, and SportsCenter picked it up and did a highlight feature around, talking about it and stuff. And then along with SportsCenter, some of our work with ESPN, we helped produce and create this big motion graphics package for a documentary series, probably about 4 years ago. And so the journalism and the motion graphics package won a sports Emmy Award, probably in 2011, or sorry, 2021. Yeah, about 2021. So yeah, those are the 3. Trying to bring home, it's when you have an office, you need stuff to decorate, right? And so you might as well try and go all out and get some shiny things to decorate the space with.
Well, you know what I think would go really nice next to those Emmys would be a health award. Well, Dustin, thank you so much for being on the program. It's been wonderful to have you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Colin. It's been a joy.
I could talk all day with Dustin about video. I'm still learning so much about this medium, so I really appreciate it when I can speak to someone who clearly has a lot more experience and just so many tips to share. One suggestion that I liked most about Dustin's was about changing your production style depending on the channel that your video that you will be played on. Your TikTok, for example, should not look exactly like your LinkedIn. Um, Actually, now that I think about it, I'm probably going to have to start shooting my stuff vertically on my phone now. in order to go on TikTok. But do I really want to go on TikTok? You know what I'm thinking about. And hey, if you made it this far in the video, we would really appreciate it if you mash that like button and click subscribe. Also, head on over to Swaay.Health, that's Swaay with 2 A's, .health, where you will find more great content like this. I'm Colin Hung, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next video.